Good morning, everybody. I wanted to pop in and answer a quick question that came in from a member and just talk through this case study that came in just a few minutes. So I think that it will be helpful for a lot of you who are working on sentence combining and syntax with some of your students. So let me rearrange my screen here so I'm not just constantly looking up here. And let me read through the case study. So the case study is that she says, I've been working on sentence combining with the first grader. We've mostly been working on combining two written sentence into one sentence with a compound subject or predicate. He's been really struggling with this, and mainly because it's because he's very little. I know that if I continue to work on sentence combining, I need to supplement written sentences with pictures. However, the main question is, should I even be working on sentence combining with him? So let's see, he had some really low scores on the self-preschool, some of the things that you would use to indicate that syntax was an issue. So something like concepts and following directions, word structure, and recalling sentences, those were all low. So her thought was, I need to focus on syntax with this student. However, he does have, because he's only in first grade, he has weak orthographic knowledge, weak phonological awareness, those types of things. So really the question is this the right way to focus? Even if we are working on syntax with a student, should I be doing this, or should I be shifting to another area of focus? So one of her questions is, would morphological study focus on phonological awareness be beneficial for the student? I would say it sounds like he is pretty low. So you absolutely could, if he is struggling with sentence combining, you absolutely could shift the focus of your therapy and focus on morphology and doing some morphology study, doing some phonological awareness, some of the things that I outline in Language Therapy Advanced Module 5. You absolutely could shift the focus. I think a lot of times people are a little bit afraid of putting something down to focus on something else. But remember, with language skills, a lot of times we're working on something, and we're kind of like, are they getting it? Are they not? A lot of times we're planting seeds and we don't even realize it yet. So it's totally okay to shift the focus and focus on something else for a while. And then maybe we pull in some of those things, some of those skills that we've been working on before with our students, but it's not the main focus of therapy. So it's absolutely okay to shift the focus to working on morphology with the student, because there will be some opportunities to practice syntax as well. Sentence combining is a really powerful technique for students with syntax, but it is not the only one. There are certainly other ways that you can address syntax. For example, if you're working on morphology and you're maybe even working on putting a different ending on a word to change its verb tense, and then you're working on putting the word in a sentence, then you're still working on syntax there. We do have to get beyond the say the word in a sentence when we're targeting syntax, but that's still a good thing to do. We just don't want to stop there. So what you can be doing with this student is you could shift the focus to morphology, and maybe you model for the student some ways that they can use compound and complex sentences for and pull in some of those sentence types that you've been working on in sentence combining, so they're still getting that reinforcement. The other question that she had was, would some other type of study on syntax be beneficial for this student, and should I be doing that, especially if he has a hard time spelling and writing? So a lot of times what you can do for students that struggle with this is that it's always okay to focus on a different sentence type, because I do give you a hierarchy in those ultimate guides to syntax, different sentence types that are easier or harder. But you never know, because language growth isn't always linear. A lot of times we want some kind of a curriculum that's going to show us a hierarchy. And yes, some hierarchies do exist, but sometimes we just never know what kids are going to be able to do. So it's totally okay to try a different sentence type if they're stuck on one. Maybe they'll be able to do a harder one. Maybe they'll be able to combine two sentences. So combining, making a compound sentence two simple sentences just joined by a conjunction. That one's actually a little bit easier because you don't have to manipulate parts of the sentence. So that would be something to try. Another thing is that we do have sentence deconstruction as a technique. So that is another avenue that you could try, where you give the student two different sentences and maybe you show him the written form of the sentence and you read it out loud to him. You read one, or you read the whole sentence, and then you say, okay, tell me two separate sentences that instead of one sentence. So it could be something like, mom cleaned the dishes and dad mowed the lawn. So the sentences that you could come up with are mom did the dishes, dad mowed the lawn. Seeing if they can pull out those two different ideas from those sentences, even if the syntax isn't exactly perfect, sometimes that can be something that you can work on as well. Another thing that you can do to work on syntax, again, is using those sentence starters. So again, starting the first part of the sentence and seeing if they can fill in the next one. So mom cleaned the dishes and then you see if they can fill in the rest of the sentence, whether it be verbal or whether it be written as well. It's okay for those kids who are a little bit lower, who don't quite have those spelling skills yet, to be exposing them to the written language, but not necessarily requiring them to always be able to read it and write it 100% accurately. Again, you're planting those seeds. Those seeds are starting to grow, but they might not be able to do all of those skills yet. So at least if you can solidify some of it verbally, then that is something that's going to help. Another thing is that sometimes you can do almost a kind of a fill in the blank thing, where you give them part of the sentence and you see if they can fill in the part that's missing, whether it be verbally or whether it be in written. But again, play around with it. Don't worry about, maybe sometimes you might be doing some kind of priming or prompting. Again, with sentence starters, what you're doing is you're starting to say part of the sentence and then you're allowing them to finish. But what that might end up having to be some of the time is that you might be doing some priming beforehand, meaning that you might actually say the entire sentence that you want them to say and then see if they can repeat it back to you. Or maybe you might say the sentence and then give them a sentence starter and see if they can fill in the blank. It's not just, again, you're not going to just sit there and just have them repeat sentences over and over again for the entire session, but doing some of those priming exercises where they're just repeating what you say before you actually ask them to do the task, that can prime them so that they're used to using some of those structures. Because again, repeating over and over again and repeatedly using those structures, even if it's just verbally, what that's going to do is give them experience using that sentence structure, and that's going to start drawing those connections for them. So again, don't be afraid to use simple repetition. Remember, you're not going to be rote drilling it the entire session, but what you're going to do is use it as kind of a priming and prompting, especially if you're like, you're asking them to put the sentence together and they can't do it at all. Then maybe you say, okay, here's one way we could say it. Say the sentence, have them repeat it back. Maybe try that a couple times. And then what you could also do is you could say, again, say the sentence, say part of the sentence, have them fill in the blank or fill in the rest of it out loud. And then maybe you eventually phase back with that same sentence and see if they can say the whole sentence. So basically you're giving them the whole thing and then gradually giving them less and less until they come up with it on their own. And that kind of thing, it seems very rote and drill, but eventually what you want to be able to do is phase it back so that they can come up with some of those sentences on their own. But doing, again, some of those activities that give them experience using those sentence forms is going to help to make some of those connections. We just want to be able to gradually fade those prompts and make the activity less and less structured. Eventually, we want them to be able to just come up with a compound sentence on their own, or just give them two sentences and have them combine them. But we might have to do a lot of that modeling and then fading fading those cues, fading those models, fading the amount of prompts and models that we give them until they can get the entire thing correct on their own. And it's okay to do this. It does for kids who can write and read. Again, there are some working memory things that come into play here. Sometimes it's hard to hold that whole sentence in your head and then be able to come up with and combine that sentence. I'm thinking of a bunch of the subtests on, for example, the TOLD, where you give them a bunch of sentences and then they've got to explain it. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting there sometimes thinking like, I don't even think I could do this if I didn't see the sentence in front of me. But again, yeah, like we want to just keep pushing kids and see how much they can do. All right, so this pretty much answers that question. Let me make sure that I've answered all of it. Yep. Okay. So again, you know, with all these cases that you guys come up with, post them. It is usually better if you've got a question. I know a lot of you, I do take some questions via email. I am going to be moving to more of the questions being done in the group, just because I want to keep it streamlined. I want to be able to keep it in a place where I can answer you more quickly. So the other thing about answering them in the group is that, again, I see Michaela, I see Tasha hopping in here, and they weren't the people who asked the question, but they might have some cases where they might have the same question. So it's always helpful for other people in the group to see your questions. So I'd encourage everybody in here, if you've got a question about any of the course content for any of the courses, Vocab Foundation, Language Therapy Advanced, Social Language Roadmap, and the Narratives course, any of those questions are always going to be helpful for people in this group. So feel free to post them in here, and then I'll talk through any of those questions that you have or direct you to the place in the program you can go to watch a module that will help answer that question. And a lot of times I might have already done a live session like this to answer a question as well. So thanks everybody for hopping into this impromptu live this morning. Again, keep your questions coming, and everybody have a great day.